Alrighty. Good afternoon, everybody. How's it going? Coming down to the final stretch. All right, last class we looked at pest control and integrated pest management, which was 5.6 and 14. All right. And because some of you all are taking the test on Friday, I want to just continue to look at some of the topics that we haven't done yet. So let's look at 14 today, as soon as everybody gets in. But a reminder again of those of you who are taking the test on Friday, you have to be there like 7:30 in the morning. Can't be late. Make sure you bring all of your tools that you need, the laptop in particular. And give a look through on the tips at the end of each unit. That is always helpful. As you can only prepare so much. Basically, you want to remember that it is a writing exam and you do want to write as much as possible. There are some, like how you've been practicing, there are some multiple choice, but there are a lot of the FRQs on that test as well. So prepare yourself for letting them know everything that you know. More is always better than less. Alrighty. Some of you still, so I'm not putting any more assignments in the AP classroom. So 5.14 is the last one. So please make sure you get caught up in the, so I'll continue showing the units this week, but I'm not going to add assignments to it because tomorrow is the day for all seniors grades have to be posted tomorrow. So I'm not trying to add anything else to the pile. If you're a senior, please make sure all of the things that you want me to grade are turned in, and we will go from there. Uh, um, oh, what else? What else? So much, so much. This is that week that everybody is trying to get all those last minute things in. Okay, so while we're waiting on that, the module that I want you to look at, or waiting on folks to come in, the module that I want you to look at is 5.15. Get a preview look at that. This stuff is all over the place. Sustainable agriculture. And some of the topics on this we've covered already, but it's being as we're at that point where we're reviewing. This will be a good one to go back and look at. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and start that so that those of you who need to work can work. And those who are not here are the ones who are always late.
It's Mr. Smeeds, and today we're going to be covering topic 5.15, which is sustainable agriculture. We'll be talking about a bunch of different sustainable agricultural methods. We'll talk about how they work, and most importantly, we'll talk about the environmental consequences that they solve. Our objective for the day is to be able to describe different sustainable agricultural techniques, and they'll kind of break down into three different categories. Those will be techniques aimed at preventing soil erosion, techniques that are aimed at improving soil nutrient levels, and then finally a technique called rotational grazing. Our skill that we'll practice at the end of today's video will be proposing a solution to an environmental problem. So the first group of solutions we'll be looking at are all aimed at soil conservation. So first of all, soil conservation is just agricultural techniques that are aimed at minimizing erosion. This is really important because in the United States, topsoil erodes 10 times faster than it forms. So it takes a long time for rocks to break down, for weathering to occur, but it does not take a long time for the wind and the rain and poor agricultural practices to erode topsoil. So it's really critical that we're thinking about how to conserve it. So why is this important? Well, it's going to prevent the loss of the nutrients that are in the topsoil. It's going to prevent the loss of moisture that's in the soil that plants need in order to grow. It's going to keep those decomposers in the topsoil that are really important there. And remember, organic matter is really important for retaining nutrients and moisture in the soil. So contour plowing is a method of soil conservation that involves plowing your agricultural lines parallel to your slopes instead of down your slopes. That's going to form kind of mini terraces that will catch water running down the slopes, carrying that precious topsoil. This is a picture of it so we can kind of understand that it makes these nice terraces. And again, these just act kind of like little guards to catch soil that's running off. Terracing is this idea of cutting flat platforms into a steep hillside. And these flat platforms will also catch water that could be carrying your topsoil off of your slopes during heavy rainfall. It's going to conserve water. It's going to conserve topsoil as well. So this is a really beneficial practice that can allow you to do agriculture in areas that are very steep and otherwise might become eroded too quickly to use. And finally, we have perennial crops. Perennial crops are crops that live year-round, so they're not necessarily harvested at the end of the year and the whole plant isn't taken out of the ground. We're going to leave the plant in place. It's going to have some root structure underneath the ground, and that's going to help preserve the topsoil by keeping it anchored in place. So you don't have to rip the whole plant out of the ground at the end of the harvest. A lot of that plant stays there, and it's just going to come back the next year. So we can see in the diagram here, when you have a more complex root structure, when you have larger plants that come back year after year, they're going to help retain a lot of the soil moisture, and they're going to help capture a lot of that runoff and prevent it from carrying your topsoil down the slope and away from your agricultural.
In my experience, making mistakes takes longer than making a plan.
Fields. Windbreaks are just trees or other plants that are planted around the agricultural fields in order to stop the force of the wind and prevent it from carrying so much of the topsoil away from the agricultural fields. A really beneficial component here is that they can also be used to generate firewood. You could plant fruit trees so that you're generating some income through fruit sales as well, a valuable habitat for pollinator species. So we can see an example here of just having this large kind of buffer strip along your crops so that the wind's force is reduced a little bit. This diagram can help us visualize how the wind will kind of be forced up and over the crops rather than passing straight over them and carrying away a lot of that topsoil. No-till is a method that is pretty straightforward. It just involves not tilling or mixing your agricultural fields at the end of the season. This is really beneficial because you can leave crop residue on your actual fields, and that crop residue is going to, one, add organic matter to the soil, but two, it acts like a kind of moisturizing layer, trapping moisture in the soil, and also it kind of anchors and holds the soil in place so that the wind is not able to blow it away as easily. This is going to prevent loose soil from being eroded, which is a big problem when you're using a tiller, which mixes up the soil and loosens it. So we can see in this diagram here, the soil that's not tilled is going to have this thick organic layer on it. That's going to hold in water. It's going to reduce runoff. But on the right, when we're tilling over and over again, that soil is going to become really dry. Remember, dry soil erodes more easily. And so tilling can, over time, lead to soil erosion. And then finally, we have strip cropping, which is kind of another name for intercropping. This is going to involve planting crops of different densities in alternating rows. So some crops like wheat are very dense. Other crops like corn are not very dense. And so when you plant a really dense crop in between your less dense crops, what you're going to do is catch some of the soil and water that might erode from those less tightly packed rows of corn, and this is going to help limit topsoil erosion and conserve water. The next methods that we look at here are all aimed at improving soil fertility, which is the level of key nutrients that are needed for plant growth. So replanting the same crops over and over again depletes the soil of the same nutrients over and over again. However, if you rotate your crops, what you give is the soil some time to recover. So some crops are really nitrogen demanding, like corn, and what you can do is actually intersperse your corn seasons with legumes. So these are plants like peas and beans, and they have beneficial nitrogen fixing bacteria in their roots that actually take atmospheric nitrogen, fix it, and return it to the soil. So after you've done some corn intensive seasons, that's going to deplete the nitrogen from your soil. You can plant legumes in between that to return nitrogen to the soil. And if you alternate using that pattern, over time, you should maintain fairly stable nitrogen levels instead of depleting them and having to constantly use synthetic fertilizers to bring them back up. Green manure is another method that can be used to improve fertility, but it can also limit erosion. So oftentimes after a crop is harvested, the fields are just left bare for the season. But if you plant what's called a cover crop, this is just a quick growing crop that grows in that off season or in between the harvest and replanting of your main crop. It's beneficial because its roots will stabilize the soil, limiting erosion. But once that cover crop is ready to be cleared, you can cut it down and leave the remains on the field, and it will act as what we call a green manure. One, it's going to break down over time and add nutrients back into the soil. But two, it's going to act like a moisturizing layer and prevent evaporation loss. So we can see a diagram here, just a picture of that green manure being cut down and left on the field. And then this diagram helps us visualize that during the winter, when normally there's no crops, we can have certain crops like oats or clover, and then they can be clipped down. Their biomass is just left on the soil. It limits erosion. And then slowly over time, those nutrients will be released into the soil, and we're going to get better yields the following year when we plant our main crop because all of those nutrients are being returned to the soil. And finally, we have the addition of crushed limestone. So limestone releases calcium carbonate when it's placed into a soil, and this is good because that's a base and that will neutralize soil. So remember that when soil becomes too acidic, it has a really high H+ ion concentration, and H+ ions actually leach nutrients out of the soil by displacing positively charged ions. So they push them out of the soil and then the water leaches them away. That's a problem. So we can see here in this graph, as we become more acidic, as we're moving down in pH, all of those key nutrients are becoming less available. Limestone acts as a base though, which neutralizes your soil and moves it closer to 7. We can see that as we move up in pH or closer to 7, becoming more neutral, that's going to increase the level of nutrients that are retained in the soil. Another problem is that acidic soil makes toxic metals more soluble. So when your pH starts to drop, what you're going to see is a huge increase in the solubility of aluminum. Aluminum is a metal that's toxic to many plants. It can damage their roots and kill them if it reaches high enough concentrations. So adding limestone will also neutralize your pH and prevent aluminum from becoming soluble in your soil, which can kill your crops. And then finally, the calcium that's released with calcium carbonate is a needed plant nutrient as well. And so this can just further contribute to the fertility of soil. And finally, we have rotational grazing. So rotational grazing just involves moving animals that graze on grass through different pastures periodically so that they don't overgraze. Remember that overgrazing clips grass down too low to survive, so the grass over time will die. It also compacts the soil, so it's going to lead to erosion. But rotation actually promotes more growth than if the pasture were just left to its own growth. Now, this is because the plants are going to be clipped back to this sort of medium height where they're growing the fastest. So if animals are continually grazing, they keep the grass in its optimal growth stage. So remember that if grass is clipped too low, the roots can't grow and it's going to die. But if it's let to grow too long, it's going to actually die and go to seed, and we're going to have decreased growth and it's going to slow down. But if the animals are continually clipping the grass back to this optimal level of growth, we're actually going to see longer root structure over time as well. That's because the plant is continually in its rapid growth phase, and so it's going to be able to store more energy in its roots, and its roots will become longer and healthier over time. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if we're using rotational grazing and making sure that grass is never clipped down too low, and also that it's not allowed to just grow super long, that's going to actually promote faster growth than if we were to just leave the pastures alone. So our suggested science scale for practice FRQ 5.15 today is to make a claim that proposes a solution to an environmental problem. So I want you to take a look at this picture specifically and describe 2 soil conservation strategies that could be used to prevent erosion in agricultural fields that would be established in this landscape. All right, everybody, thanks for tuning in today. Don't forget to like this video if it was helpful, subscribe for future APES video updates, and check
Okay.
out other notes over here to the side. And as always, think like a mountain, write like a scholar.
The new Infiniti QX80 and QX60 Sport are dark chromed, stealthed out thieves.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that alone. All right, so I'm going to just let you all work on whatever you need to work on. I'll do the review. He has a total review one, and I'll do that Wednesday for those of you who are still with me on Wednesday. And we'll leave it at that. Okay. So a couple of you, I guess some of you are on top of it all the time. And as soon as I give it, you got it done. And some of you all are procrastinating. I think I might have had 1 or 2 of you that missed the test on Friday. So let me check on that. Okay, just 1 person, and they're not here yet. All right. Okay, so I am going to put scores in for, and I've written them down. I just hadn't put them in yet. So when I was doing this, when I was writing them down, I didn't have 514 for most people. So there will be a column for 5.3, 4, 5, and 14. So please make sure, I thought I did that, but it's not showing. So that's what I'm putting in today. So that will be the last thing that I put in. It's the AP Classrooms scores for 5.3, 4, 5, and 14. Like I said, the last I looked. Hey, never mind. Yeah, it is in already. I do have it in. And this 2 people need to work on that. 3 people. So the scores, yeah, the scores for 5.3 through 5 and 14 are already in the grade book. If it's, and some of you had incomplete ones, missing ones. So it is out of 12. So if you don't have 12, something was missing. All right, if there is something that you were missing that you can work on right now that will make your final grade even prettier than it is, please let me know and we can make that happen. Where are your grades on this side? Okay, I'll check on those. What else is in here? All right. Okay. And again, if you have completed everything and you are taking the AP exam on Friday, please use this time to just read through the units, do the study pages at the end, because they do have study guides at the end of every unit. And if you owe me nothing, please don't sit there like you have nothing to do. And you said, because senior grades are in tomorrow, I'm not trying to add any new assignments. This is it. But I do want you to spend this time wisely. So study something. Attendance. All right, so I'm going to do another sweep through the AP classroom for those who still had some missing things. And I can say this because those of you who are present are on my good list. So I want to thank you all for doing your work and having good scores and not causing me to make too many phone calls home. I do appreciate that. And I also hope that somewhere along the way you learn something that will make you a more environmentally aware citizen, and you think about the planet that you live on and the way you can make it better going forward as an adult. And then that. Oh. Jesus. Well, jeepers. How do we do that? Click on your course. Okay, that's I'm sorry, they just added a whole new with this hacking business is just ridiculous. All the things they can do to mess your grades up. I suppose. Why is Okay, okay. All right, folks, if you're in a good place to stop, go ahead and do so. And you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And see you tomorrow.